Okay, so you've purchased a PocketMage beta kit, or you're looking for something to watch, I guess, and you don't have the kit. But anyway, this is the build guide for that beta kit. I guess this isn't like a normal video, so I'll just jump right into it. There are gonna be a few things in this build process that won't apply to the final kit. So I will mention those and also probably put something on the bottom of the screen to note if you're looking to get an idea of what it might take to build the final kit. Certain things will not be in that build process. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is take everything out of the box and make sure you have everything. What you should have is a block of air dry clay, a bag of screws, and a power button in there. There's also nuts in there. A battery if you're in the US. If you're not in the US, you won't have this. A screen PCB, a keyboard PCB, and then keyboard keys, the top case, the bottom case, the lid, and the battery cover. And I forgot to mention, but you should also have this ribbon cable and this button array. If you have all of these, then you're good to go. And we'll start with some Resin 101. So the first thing is the resin parts. And there are some caveats with these. So if you're just interested in what the build process might be for the final kit, you can skip this section and you can go to this timestamp right here. But for those of you who have a beta kit, there are some things to note with the resin parts. The first thing is they are kind of brittle, and that is just a side effect of resin as a material. The properties of resin are a bit more brittle than, say, like an injection molded part. So you do have to be a little bit more careful than you would in the final kit to not crack anything and just generally not bend anything too far because it will crack. So just be cautious of that. The other thing is that these were post-processed in bulk. So it is possible, even though they were fully cured and fully washed after their print process, there might still be some resin residue left on these. And to take care of that, what we're gonna do is get a wet paper towel and just wipe down any sort of spots where it feels tacky or sticky, and that'll help you get kind of that extra resin residue off. I wouldn't recommend washing these in a sink, like don't wash them under running water into a drain, because resin can pollute the ecosystem and it's not good for groundwater or anything like that. So please do not just wash the resin down the drain. After you're done with wiping these parts down with a wet paper towel, you're gonna wanna stick that paper towel outside in the sun for a few hours or a day, and then you can throw it in the trash. Sticking it outside for a few hours allows the resin to cure, and then you can safely throw it away in the garbage and it won't pollute anything. For wiping down these parts, if you have isopropyl alcohol, that'll work a bit better. But for now, I'll just use a wet paper towel and that should work fine. Let me go grab one. Okay, I've got some gloves on now, and I'm gonna remove all of the electronics from the area because we don't want those damaged by water. And I might as well remove these too because we're not using them right now. But we're just gonna take these parts, just give them a quick wipe. Just get any of that excess resin off. It's not super crucial that you get the inside surfaces, but any of the outside surfaces that you may be touching, I'd recommend giving a quick wipe. Make sure there's no, wet excess resin on there. And I would recommend getting a pair of gloves for this. Nitrile is the best material of gloves that you're gonna wanna grab because nitrile doesn't break down from the resin. Again, there should be very small, if any, amounts of resin on these parts, but this is just to be safe because they were processed in bulk and I can't guarantee that there's no resin on them. So just a quick wipe for each of these. You should be able to tell if there is any resin on them, and just wipe it off just to make sure that you are not handling wet resin. If you want to be really safe with these resin parts and make sure that they're, fully cured, you can always leave them outside in the sun for a few minutes, or just take them out, hold them in your hand. In direct sunlight, they should cure pretty quickly because they do cure with UV. After we've done that, there are gonna be a few supports you're gonna wanna remove here. And the best way to do that is with tweezers or flush cutters or something like that. You can even really do it with your fingers. You just kinda snap them off like that. Most notable areas would be inside this battery door. You're gonna wanna definitely remove those because they'll get in the way with the battery. There are some in here that you could technically leave there, but For aesthetic reasons, you probably want to grab those out of there like this. Make sure you wear eye protection because you do not want these getting in your eyes when you snap them off. It could hurt you because they tend to be pretty sharp. And these can they're cured resin, so these can just go in the trash as well. Okay, this one looks good enough to me. There's a few on this part as well. See, I'm glad I'm wearing eye protection because that one just flew and directly hit my glasses, so it would have 100% hit me in the eye. So please wear eye protection. Anyway, that one. Oh, make sure you get these in this channel too, actually. These ones need to be completely removed because the ribbon cable does sit in there pretty tightly, okay? There also are sometimes some in these little screw holes, so you can get rid of those the same way. Just crack them out of there. You can also probably do this without any tools, but tweezers is probably the easiest possible way to do it. And then this one here, this part, I like to just come in here and do a little rotate to make sure there's no leftover little like nubs or anything. And this is important because these holes do need to be, you know, have no resistance because it is a fairly tight tolerance with the buttons. So just make sure these have no little burrs in them or anything. And then there is a support in here that you'll need to remove as well. And that one looks good to me. And then this one shouldn't have any supports on it, but you might need to clean something out. You'll notice on this part, it is very thin. And because resin is not a perfect compound, and because of the way that these are manufactured, sometimes you can get a bit of warping. You can see on this part, you got a slight curve up, and that is gonna cause issues with the keyboard because if the keyboard is bent up, some of the keys could fall out and cause issues. So what we can do to mend this is to run it under hot water. And when the resin kind of starts to soften up under the hot water, we're gonna bend it back. And then once we've set it in the place we want, we're gonna run it under cold water to kind of set it in place and make sure it stays flat. If anything, we want a little bit of a concave so that it's bent inwards like this. The best way is to have it bent in. Okay, so now I've got the tap running here with some hot water and I've got my top piece here. So what we're gonna do is just run this under the hot water and you will feel it start to soften. And you're just gonna very gently bend it this way. This is the top surface with the humps, and this is the bottom surface with the ribs. You wanna bend it inwards like this. So just run this part underwater and bend it inwards very slowly. Don't bend it too far because it will crack, so be very careful because if it cracks, then you're kind of out of luck. You'll have to glue it or something. But again, please make sure you're doing this after you wipe any liquid resin off of this because liquid resin cannot go down the drain. Once it's hot, you will feel it really start to soften up a whole bunch. Okay, so now you can see that our part is a lot flatter than it used to be. Don't forget this top part as well. Make sure you bend that into place. And after you're happy with it, you're gonna hold it exactly how you want it and then switch to cold water. Keep holding it how you want it. Push the inside of these keys in. Make sure everything is nice and cool. Now you can turn your water off. Give it a little shake. And you'll see now, instead of bending up, you can't see that. Now you'll see instead of bending up, we're actually bending down a little bit, which is what we want. So after this, you just take this with a paper towel and just pat it dry, and then you're good to go. Okay, now that we've done that, we're ready to continue the build process. So let's go ahead and grab our keyboard PCB here. Now this isn't gonna be the final assembly. What we're gonna do right now is seat all of the nuts into the case because this will make it a lot easier down the line. So we'll start here by throwing this PCB in here, and then we'll just put this on top, and it should fit pretty perfectly. This is not staying in here, so don't worry too much about if you put all the buttons in there or anything. We're really just working on those screws right now. So you're gonna take your baggie of screws here, and then you're gonna want either an Allen key or a screwdriver with an Allen key bit on the end. And then we'll take this bag of screws and you can just gently dump it down. And there should be nuts here. There should be four different things. There's the power button. We can set that aside for now. You've got nuts. Those are M2 nuts. And then you have a longer M2 screw, which is 12 millimeters. That doesn't really matter. But there's a shorter M2 screw, and that's 5 millimeters. Again, doesn't really matter the lengths, but you just need to know there's a nut, a longer screw, and a shorter screw. Depending on the length of these holes, we're going to use a longer or shorter. Before we do this, actually, let's crack this open and grab our battery door here, and then we're going to grab one of these nuts, put it down in the battery door slot, seat in there pretty well. Then what we're going to do is we're going to flip this over, going to take our battery door, and it should slot in like this, just like that. And then we're going to take one of the shorter screws, the 5 millimeter ones, and we're just going to gently screw that in here to make sure that that nut is set, because we really don't want that one falling out, or else it'll be hard to get the battery door back on after it's assembled. So tighten it down, not too tight because you don't want to crack these resin parts, but snug, and then you can back it out. And that nut should be pretty firmly in there just from that pressure. And we're just going to do this with all the different nuts. So let's start with this one here. We're going to throw the nut down in there, and sometimes it helps to have tweezers to position it, because if your screwdriver is magnetic, it's going to be really annoying. So just position it in there like that. And we're going to grab a long screw, and it's probably easier to go from the bottom, but we're just going to put it through the hole, then gently start threading until we feel it catch. Don't quite tighten it down all the way because we do need to put the other ones in first. We're going to tighten them all at the end. Let's grab another nut here, do the other corner, and we're going to just put it through the hole here, do the same thing. Okay, and this one here is the last of our big screws. So again, this one, 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 this one. All of the ones on these outer edge here are going to be the long screws, and then these two here are going to be the short screws. So before we, let's just move on to the short screws. So you're going to do them the exact same way. Put your nut down there, and then instead of the long screw, this time you're going to grab the short one and stick it through the other side. Okay, that's good. Let's do the other one. Some of you may be asking, why do I use all of these screws and nuts? Why not those heat threaded inserts? Well, in the past, I've had tons of those heat threaded inserts fail and crack or pull the plastic out or whatever. And so it makes like a laptop or whatever almost impossible to repair. So I decided to go with these nuts because, number one, they're everywhere, easily sourceable. If you lose it, you can get it back. You can get these screws back easily. They don't have a special head. They're just hex. So the reason is so you can repair this. So it's easy to repair. So it may be a little bit more annoying, but that's because it's, completely free for you to repair. It's it doesn't take any proprietary heat threaded inserts or anything like that. It's just a standard M2 nut and M2 screw. But anyway, now that we have all of these in here looking good, we're going to go ahead and tighten them. Again, not too much, not so much that you feel like you're cracking it, but about hand tight is what you want to go with these. So just screw it until you can't comfortably screw it any tighter, and that should be a good level for these. All right, so we have everything tightened, and now we can back all of these out, and all of the screws or all the nuts should stay in there. So just go ahead and back all of these out, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so we backed out all those screws. Should be able to take this off. If you want to keep this protected, you can stick it back in this bag for now. And then we should have our backing here with all of the nuts in place. Actually, it looks like one of them fell out, unfortunately. So we might have to redo that one, but no big deal. If any of them fall out, you can just redo it or put a drop of super glue in there, whatever you need to do. Again, it's not a perfect process. These are resin parts, so unfortunately, the tolerances do vary a bit, and it can cause things like that to happen. Okay, and now the next step is going to be to take these buttons and remove them from the support structure. So what you can start by doing is just bending to kind of loosen these up. If you crack it, it's okay, not a big deal. But this will help get in like an initial loosening going on these and make it a bit easier down the line. But let's start with this little piece so I can show you what to do. I recommend using something that is not sharp. For example, like the Allen key that you use, because if you slip, you don't want to, poke yourself, and no one wants to go to the emergency room. So let's just use something dull and get under the supports here, and then you should be able to pull up and they'll snap right off just like that. You don't want to put too much pressure on these, or you could cause a dent, or you could slip and hurt yourself. So just be very gentle. If you're having trouble getting one off, what you can do is give it a little wiggle back and forth and then push up, and you should be able to easily snap them off like that. Okay, now I've got all of these removed. We can go ahead and toss this. And let's take a closer look at these buttons themselves. So it may be a little bit hard to see, but taking a close look at these buttons, you can see there are some little kind of pokey bits. And it's possible that these cause issues when you're putting it in the top case, because you may feel like the buttons get stuck when you push them down, or they're a little bit sticky, whatever. I would say as you're going through and you're testing these buttons, if they do feel sticky, then usually the cause is that these kind of parts that stick out need to be either removed or just kind of broken off. Either use your nail. Usually you can use your nail because they're pretty soft, and just break off those little bits. Or use, a bit of sandpaper or flush cutters or something to do that. Okay, the next step of our process here is going to involve the keys you just broke off and this little bit of clay that came with your kit. So you should be able to crack this open and remove the clay. And this should be enough to fill in the legends on the keys. What we're going to do is take this clay and basically push it in to these keys one by one and kind of rub the excess off like this. And I might recommend putting down a paper towel or a garbage bag or something, because this does tend to make the table a little dusty. It is easily cleaned up with a wet paper towel, and it is pretty easy to kind of set these up. But essentially what you're going to do is exactly what I just showed you, which is take this clay, take just a tiny bit, grab your button here, and push it in. The best way to do it is push in and then slide off. So I'm pushing in and then I'm sliding off to get the excess off the top. I'll put that excess there right back on the big lump, and then you can give it a couple more wipes. Sometimes there's a little dust on the top, just a dab of water on your finger might help, but for the most part you can just get it by wiping, and then you move on to the next one. There's sometimes some of this clay that gets stuck on the side of the button. You're going to want to try to make sure that doesn't happen, but if it does happen, it's not a big deal. Even once it dries, you can easily scrape that off, or you can get it off while it hasn't set yet, just with tweezers or your finger, just wipe it off like that. Okay, so now I finished pushing all those clay legends into these buttons, but as you can see, they're a little bit dusty still. There's a little bit of the clay stuck on the top, and they just generally don't look super clean. So what we can do about this is just grab a little tub of water, and I would use probably something that you don't eat off of for this, because you're not going to want to get any sort of resin or anything in that. But what you'll do is you'll just take, just a drop of water on your finger and give it a wipe. It should clean right up. This clay is really easy to get off with just water. And if there's some on the ridges on the sides, you can use something like tweezers or something else with a pointy tip to just kind of easily scrape that off. And that one's looking good. So we'll set that aside and we can do the rest. Okay, now that I've set those aside and we're waiting on them to dry, let's grab our keyboard PCB. Make sure your workstation is dry, obviously. And we're also gonna grab this button matrix. And what we're gonna do is take this button matrix and put it on here, stick it on. So this is super simple. You should just be able to peel it from the corner is best. And if you carefully peel up, there we go. You can get rid of this. And then you should have a sticker with all of your buttons on it. We're gonna turn it over so the sticky side is facing the circuit board and just carefully lay it down. And you may need to trim the top here depending on the size of it. So let me go do that. Okay, so I've grabbed some scissors and we're just gonna trim a couple millimeters off the top. Sometimes these are not perfectly sized, so they have to be trimmed. And I think they also overlap a bit with the OLED, so that's why we gotta trim it there. But after you've trimmed it, you should be able to just push it down, make sure everything is stuck how it's supposed to. Get kind of all the corners stuck how they're supposed to be. And now you should be able to feel those tactile buttons. Okay, so now let's grab our top case here, flip it over, and start to put the buttons into the slots. So I pretty much know this by heart by now, but I will put an image on the screen right here. You can stop, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do, and kind of use that to go off of and push the buttons in. And they should just drop in. There should not be any resistance. If there is resistance, I'll show you what to do. So as you're going through this, you might want to first kind of look through all of these, and there might be some little notches or pieces of support left over. And you can just use either your Allen key that you had before or something like this works really well, just to get in there and kind of flatten out those areas. It's going to be very hard for you to see on video, but in person you should be able to see like some notches on the inside of some of these parts, and that'll indicate to you that that's where support was, and that's kind of one of the ones that you have to, ream out a little bit. So I would just go through these one by one, honestly, before you even start putting buttons in, because it's going to make your life a whole lot easier once you do start putting the buttons together. See, this one is having a bit of trouble going in. So what I'm gonna do is check to see, okay, yeah, it looks like this one is a little bit non-circular. So we're just gonna go in here with something like this. Give it a few turns like that. And then you should be able to drop it in and it'll be a lot smoother. Yep, looks like we did it. Okay, and that was the last one. So I've got those all in there now. I'm gonna grab my circuit board and you can give this a peel now if you want so that it doesn't get stuck under. Just carefully place it down on top of all of those. And you're gonna wanna keep this orientation as much as possible because it's gonna be very, very difficult to not spill the keys everywhere if you don't keep it upright. So just try to keep it like that. And then this is going to be a bit of a tricky part, but what you're going to want to do is lift this up here on top of the top case. You don't need to have a circuit board in there or anything. What you're going to do is take this top case, gently put it in there like this. Be very careful not to bump it too hard because you will knock keys out, but just hold it. Then gently try to rotate it closed. Like so. Again, be very careful you don't knock any keys. After you get to this point, you can lift up, make sure that there are no keys out of place. If you're okay, then set that back on there. We're gonna take one of our ribbon cables here, and we're gonna go for this screen connector. I would hold this down with your finger and carefully open the little black door, and with the blue part facing up, not this part, this blue part facing up. We're going to carefully insert that ribbon cable into there, push it as far as it'll go, and then close that little door back down. Then we're going to take this ribbon cable, try not to bend it, carefully push it down into this hole and through to the other side. You don't have to worry about how tight that is now. We'll figure that out later. Now you can lift this up, make sure you didn't jostle any buttons, make sure they're all in the right place, and carefully put this back down. And then we're going to take our main piece here, and we're going to take our power button and slot it in the top right here, and then hold that as we carefully put it down onto the circuit board. Everything should fit. If it doesn't, maybe give it a little wiggle, make sure everything slots into where it's supposed to go. And then we're going to take our screwdriver and one of the small screws, carefully lift this up, the whole thing. You can pinch right here if you want, that'll hold everything together. And then you're just going to take this screw and put it into the hinge. Get that pretty tight, but not fully tight yet. Then we're going to set this down, grab another screw. We can pinch again, and then screw in the other piece. Now we are almost good to go. Let's carefully, very carefully, flip this over. And holding this bottom part, we can open this slowly, and we should see all of our buttons are still in place. Set the device down and grab one of your long screws. We're going to throw this right here in the middle. Tighten that down, not all the way, but almost all the way. And now it should be safe to handle, and you shouldn't have a risk of any sort of buttons falling out. Now, what we're going to do is check that none of our nuts fell out of the back, and if they did, that's okay. We'll just put them back in there. We're going to start carefully putting those bolts in. So we're going to be using all of the long bolts and just carefully putting them into the holes, tightening them all the way, almost all the way, but not quite the whole way, because we're going to do the final tightening later. Now that we've got our last bolt in here, we can test the keys, make sure none of them are feeling tight. If any of them are feeling tight, usually just give it a wiggle, try to wiggle it around, press it a bunch of times. It should loosen up. So now that we have all of these in, let's go in and give them that last quarter turn to fully tighten them. And you don't want to tighten this too much again because the resin is prone to cracking. But just hand tight should be good and should be safe for the resin. So I'm just going in. I'm not, exerting too much force, but about to the point that's comfortable for tightening with just your hand. Should have about a quarter turn left in each of these if you did it right. Okay, so now we've got them all tightened down. Everything still seems okay. So let's move on to the next thing. I'm gonna go ahead and grab our screen PCB here, and we'll take that out of the protective packaging. Put that aside for now. So for this, the golden strip is gonna go on the right side here. So it should fit just like this. This should be how it goes. So what we're gonna start off by doing is flipping this over. We're gonna take our ribbon cable. We're gonna lift this door again, like we did before. And we're gonna simply put it in there like that. And then you should be able to start with it up here and then carefully bend it down. There is a slight bend in the ribbon cable. This is not a problem. And then we'll push it back, just like that. Then you want to close it to make sure that there's not too much pressure on the ribbon cable. Looks like we did okay there. And now we'll start putting those final bolts in. So you're going to use those small, short bolts and the normal nuts, and we'll start with this top right corner. The best way is to stick it through like this, and then just use your finger to hold that nut in the hole, tighten it. Make sure you're not tightening onto the e-ink screen because you could crack it. Just make sure that the bolt head is like off to the side of the screen. It should be, but just make sure because we don't want to crack screen. And then this one we are going to do a cross pattern. So now we're going to do the bottom left one, same way. Push through, put the nut in the other side, and then tighten not all the way, but a little less than all the way. Now, third one, we'll go top left for this one. Okay, got that one. And then the last one is going to actually be under this little tab. So if you want to, you can peel this off now. Just be very careful not to scratch it with your screwdriver, now that the protective film is off. But we're just going to insert our bolt in here and put the final nut in. Okay. So now we have our PocketMage. It's almost ready to go. You should have left a couple extras. There should be an extra of the long one, an extra of the short one, and then there's another short one. That one's not an extra, and an extra nut. So there should be an extra one of each type. And then this one here will be used with the battery door. We'll move all of these screws aside. And we're gonna put the PocketMage in programming mode because now we have to flash the firmware. So there is a little dip switch right here. Okay, so here's that dip switch. You can see on top it says program, and on the bottom it says mute. And in person this will be easier to see, but one of these sides should be the left side, says on. So there is a buzzer in here that does make noise. If you want that to be enabled, you can keep this dip switch switched to the on position. On position means that the buzzer is enabled. That is just an option. That is not critical for anything that we're doing here, but just so you know, there is a buzzer hardware mute switch in case you just never want it on. What we're really looking for here is the program switch. From the factory, this should be switched to the on position, but if it's not, you can take something sharp, something small, and switch that. I don't know how well that comes across on camera, but you should see that this little thing can move over if you push it with something small. So here we have it in non-program mode, and we'll take something sharp and we'll push it to program mode. Now you can see the switch is in the on position, and that's how we know that our PocketMage is ready to be programmed. So now let's hook this up to a computer and I'll show you how to flash the firmware. To plug the PocketMage in for flashing, you're simply going to hold the power button here, and then you're going to plug in your USB-C port. You should see a light come on the back, and nothing should happen. That's okay, nothing is supposed to happen. Let's move to the computer. Okay, now we're on my PC, and I apologize for the terrible audio quality, but I've got my PocketMage plugged in here, and I guess it is worth noting that every time you want to flash the firmware, you have to make sure that the PocketMage is both in programming mode and the battery is unplugged, and that will allow you to flash the firmware. So once you've plugged it in while holding the power button, you can go ahead and navigate to pocketmage.org, and you can go up to the top here where it says build, click on that, and then we're going to want to go to the web flasher. Once you're in the web flasher, make sure you uncheck this box for your first installation. After this, if you want to update your firmware, you're going to want to leave this checked because you don't want all of your settings and information erased. But for this brand new device, we're going to uncheck this box so that we get a fresh installation. Check and make sure you have the absolute newest version, and then hit the flash button. This window should pop up. It'll look a little bit different on a different browser. Maybe Chrome or Edge will look slightly different, but it will be the same information. You're going to want to click the USB-J tag in Serial Debug Unit, hit connect, and then we should get a loading bar saying that it's flashing the firmware. And then you should get a success message, and you could safely unplug your PocketMage. Let's move to the overhead cam. Okay, so now we're back in front of the PocketMage and we can safely unplug it. Now we're gonna grab our favorite micro SD card, or you don't have to use your favorite, I suppose. You can use your least favorite, whatever you wanna do. We're gonna insert it in here. There we go, it should click. Crack the PocketMage back open. And let's plug it in to see if we flashed it correctly. We should see our PocketMage booting up and our home screen comes up. It looks like we did everything correctly. Let's plug in the battery. Unplug your PocketMage, close it up, flip it over, and now we're gonna grab our battery. It should have come in the package if you have the USA kit. If not, you have it somewhere that you bought from a third party. We'll open it up, and we're gonna take this. There should be a notch on the top, and that should line up with this connector here. Make sure that the red wire for this is on the right side when you plug it in. Because if it's on the opposite side, then you could potentially fry your PocketMage. In fact, you probably would fry it. So just double check. There are indicators right in front of the battery connector that say B- and B+. Plus is red, minus is black. So just ensure that those match up before you plug this in so that you don't damage your PocketMage. But now we can just take this, line it up there, and then plug it in. You should hear the PocketMage boot up. Now we can take this cable and fold it down into this slot by the dip switch. Okay. Now we'll grab our battery door, simply slot that over it. Make sure you aren't pinching those cables because we don't want those to get smushed. But we'll just put that down there, and then we'll take that extra bolt that we had from before, grab our Allen key, just carefully screw that in. So now, if we turn the PocketMage back over, you should see that we've booted up and our PocketMage is working. Looks like my battery is low, so I'm gonna go ahead and turn off and plug in the PocketMage for about an hour. When you plug in the PocketMage to charge, you should notice a yellow LED comes on. This means that the device is charging. You should also see that in the menu here with a little plug icon. This light will turn off when the battery is completely charged, and so that's how you know the PocketMage is charged. If your PocketMage is ever not turning on for any reason, it's probably because the battery is dead, and you should plug it in until the light comes off. That way you know that it's fully charged before you power it back up. This concludes the PocketMage build guide. Thank you so much for watching. If you're a beta tester, thank you for supporting the project and helping me get this out into the world and into some more practiced coding hands than I before the final production. So thank you so much for your support, and thank you for watching the videos. Thank you to my supporters over on Patreon who you're seeing on the screen now, and I hope you have a great day.